The White House set July 4th as the deadline for the Clarity Act to become law. The Senate Banking Committee passed it with bipartisan support, and then the Federal Reserve quietly moved Ripple's bank charter application to December. Something in that picture does not add up. Had you already heard that the Federal Reserve was slowing down Ripple's bank charter application? Drop a yes or no in the comments right now. This is not financial advice. This content is for educational and informational purposes only. Always do your own research before making any financial decisions. If this kind of global analysis is useful to you, hit the like button. It helps this channel reach more people who need to see it. Now let me walk you through exactly what happened and what it means for the thesis you have been holding. What actually cleared the Senate Banking Committee last week deserves a careful read, because the headline tells one story and the fine print tells a very different one. The Digital Asset Market Clarity Act, the bill Senator Cynthia Lummis has been building since 2022, passed out of committee with bipartisan support. Senator Tim Scott, who chairs the committee, called the moment historic. He said this legislation puts America back in the driving seat for the foreseeable future. And he made a point of noting that having Senator Mark Warner, a Democrat from Virginia, working alongside Senator Lummis on anything is, in his words, like Peter walking on the water. Something you genuinely do not expect to see every day. That is real progress. There is no reason to minimize it. When asked what this legislation means for the average American, Senator Scott gave a straightforward answer. He called it democratization, lower prices, faster transactions, and the ability to make your own financial decisions without waiting for permission from a financial institution. For someone who has spent decades inside a banking system that charged fees, delayed transfers, and required institutional approval for every significant financial move, that framing lands differently than the word blockchain ever has. The technology is the mechanism. The outcome, if the bill works as designed, is direct access. Before you accept that headline as the full picture, you need to understand the 5 sections of this bill that caused the most serious friction during the committee process. Because those same 5 pressure points are the ones the opposition will use between now and the Senate floor vote. The first was rewards. Banks and crypto companies had diametrically opposed positions on how staking and yield payments should be treated under banking law. Senator Scott used those exact words. The committee found compromise language, but the underlying tension between legacy banking institutions and the digital asset industry did not disappear. It was managed for now, not resolved permanently. The second was ethics. This is the question of whether lawmakers who personally hold significant amounts of digital assets should be writing and voting on legislation that directly affects those holdings. Ethics oversight falls outside the jurisdiction of the Banking Committee. It has to be cleared separately by the Homeland Security Committee. That is another committee, another vote, another procedural step before the full bill reaches the Senate floor. The third was quorum. The Clarity Act establishes a shared regulatory framework between the CFTC, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, and the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission. The CFTC handles commodities. The SEC handles securities. Under this bill, most major digital assets would fall under CFTC jurisdiction as digital commodities. The quorum issue is straightforward but serious. Those agencies need confirmed members actually sitting in their seats for the regulatory framework to function. Rules without regulators are rules in name only. The fourth was DeFi, decentralized finance. Decentralized finance refers to financial transactions that happen on a blockchain without a traditional middleman. No bank, no broker, no clearinghouse, just code and a distributed ledger? The benefit is speed and direct access. The risk is that when you eliminate the intermediary, you eliminate the layer of consumer protection that intermediaries traditionally provide. The bill had to find language that preserves the innovation while still protecting everyday people who use it. The fifth was AML, anti-money laundering. This has been the most persistent attack on the crypto industry for years. Critics argue that blockchain makes it easier to move money illegally across borders. The Clarity Act includes provisions that supporters say give law enforcement unprecedented tools to pursue bad actors using crypto while protecting participants who are operating in good faith. Coinbase's chief legal officer stated it plainly. With this bill, law enforcement gains powers it does not currently have. That is what cleared committee. The next step, as Senator Lummis confirmed on camera, is to merge the Banking Committee version with legislation that already passed the Senate Agriculture Committee. That portion covers the CFTC side of the regulatory framework, the commodity half of the equation. Once those two pieces are merged, once the ethics language clears the Homeland Security Committee, and once technical corrections to the Genius Act are incorporated, the combined package goes to the Senate floor. Senator Lummis estimated that process alone will take about 3 weeks. After that, her team needs to confirm 60 votes. Not a simple majority of 51, but 60, which is the threshold required to overcome a filibuster. A filibuster is the Senate procedure that allows the minority to delay or block a vote indefinitely by extending debate. Getting to 60 means locking in not just Republican unity, but meaningful Democratic support as well. Only after both conditions are met does the bill go to Senate Majority Leader John Thune for a slot on the floor calendar. And Thune's schedule is growing more crowded every day. The July 4th target the White House set is already off the table. July is the more likely month for a floor vote. In Senator Lummis's own words, August is possible for a presidential signature. The calendar does not support anything faster. The opposition is not waiting for the floor vote to begin making their case. They are running ads, filing Senate amendments, and working to shape what ordinary Americans believe about this bill before any vote happens. A new ad has been circulating that attacks the Clarity Act directly. It makes 4 specific claims. First, that the bill would make it significantly easier for criminals and terrorists to launder money through crypto. Second, that there is no language stopping President Trump and his family from continuing to profit from crypto while in office. And the ad cites an NPR estimate that Trump and his family have made over $2 billion from crypto. Third, that the bill would largely deregulate the crypto industry, removing protections that apply to every other type of investment and making it far harder for regulators to pursue fraud. Fourth, that it would allow large banks to invest federally insured customer deposits into crypto, meaning taxpayers absorb the losses if those bets go wrong. The ad also highlights that the crypto lobby spent over $240 million on political campaigns in 2024. It singles out Senator Ruben Gallego of Arizona, whose campaign received over $10 million from a crypto super PAC called Protect Progress. And it mentions Senator Lummis by name, calling her the crypto queen of Congress, while noting that she has personally owned hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of Bitcoin since 2013. The people fighting for this bill have clear answers to most of those claims. The AML provision specifically expand law enforcement powers. They do not reduce them. The DeFi consumer protection language is built into the text. The ethics provisions exist precisely because of conflict of interest concerns. And introducing a regulated framework into the digital asset space is the opposite of deregulation. It is the creation of oversight, where none currently exists in a consistent form. Policy fights are not won only on the merits of an argument, though. Simple emotional messages travel faster than detailed policy explanations. The opposition has a message that fits in a 30-second ad. The bill's supporters need to explain the difference between the CFTC and the SEC, why a grandfather clause matters structurally, and why decentralized finance requires different consumer protection rules than a traditional brokerage account. That is a harder case to carry in the same format. The provision that XRP holders specifically need to track is the grandfather clause, and Senator Elizabeth Warren filed an amendment specifically designed to remove it. If you have not been following this piece closely, here is what the grandfather clause does. Any cryptocurrency that had an exchange-traded product filed with regulators by June 1st, 2026, and was actively trading on public markets at that date would automatically receive digital commodity status. It would not have to pass the mature blockchain test described in Section 104 of the bill. Digital commodity status determines which regulatory body oversees the asset, the CFTC or the SEC. And those two agencies operate with very different rules, timelines, and institutional relationships. It affects how the asset can be traded in institutional portfolios, what disclosure requirements apply, and how custodians are permitted to hold it. XRP qualified under that clause. Warren's amendment was designed to eliminate that automatic path and require XRP to go through the same Section 104 testing as every other asset. The amendment did not pass in committee, but she is expected to try again before the bill reaches the Senate floor. That fight is still open and the outcome is not settled. Think about what this story looks like from the perspective of someone who has spent decades watching the financial system decide who gets access and who does not. You saved carefully. You built something over time. You paid attention when others did not. A piece of legislation that could rewrite the rules of that system is now moving through Congress. While simultaneously, one of the infrastructure companies that built what the legacy banks say they cannot build themselves is watching its federal bank charter application get pushed to December. That is not an abstraction. That is the system operating exactly as it always has, in parallel with everything the new rules are supposed to change. While the Clarity Act was advancing through committee, the Trump administration issued a separate executive order, putting the Federal Reserve on notice. The order states that all eligible fintech companies must receive equal access to the payment system. The stated reason is explicit. For years, fintech companies have been shut out while legacy banking institutions enjoyed privileged access. The administration declared that this must end, with the cited result being lower payment costs and a more competitive financial marketplace for consumers. The phrase level playing field appeared in that executive order. It appeared in Senator Lummis' statements. It appeared in statements from multiple other senators. Brad Garlinghouse had been pushing that same framing for years, and the video's presenter noted directly that the language migrated from the industry into the Senate and then into the White House. That coordination of framing across the executive branch, the Senate floor, and the digital asset industry is not a coincidence. It reflects a deliberate shared argument. And then, in the same period that executive order was circulating, the Federal Reserve announced it was slowing down the processing of Ripple's bank charter application, pushing it to December. A bank charter is the legal license to operate as a federally recognized financial institution. It provides access to the payment rails, the clearing systems, and the settlement infrastructure of the national banking network, Ripple has been pursuing it. The Fed is delaying it by months. The banks on Capitol Hill have acknowledged publicly that the majority of legacy institutions cannot build blockchain infrastructure on their own. They do not have the internal capability or a timeline to do it. They need companies like Ripple, Coinbase, Fireblocks, Anchorage Digital, and Uphold, companies that have already built what the banks need. Some individual banks have infrastructure pre-planned and set up. Most do not. The dependency is documented and has been stated directly by banking representatives. The regulatory pathway for those same infrastructure providers keeps running into the kind of delay the executive order was written to prevent. The White House is pushing the door open. The Federal Reserve's processing queue is moving the lock. How that contradiction resolves will tell you more about the real direction of policy than the text of any bill currently moving through the Senate. Senator Lummis has been building this legislation since 2022. Each version has been more comprehensive, more technically detailed, and more politically supported than the one before. The 2025 version passed the Senate Banking Committee with every Republican voting in favor and with meaningful Democratic support from Senator Mark Warner and others. That kind of bipartisan accumulation over 3 years does not happen by accident. It is the product of sustained negotiation and technical precision. The bill that passed committee is not the same document that passed the House. Roughly 33,000 words were added to the original House version during the Senate markup process. The change was significant enough that the bill cannot go directly from a Senate floor vote to the President's desk. It has to return to the House for a second vote first. That adds time and another moment when the opposition can attempt to remove provisions, including the grandfather clause. July is the most realistic window for a Senate floor vote, based on Senator Lummis's own words. A presidential signature could come in August. The July 4th target was aspirational. The legislative calendar does not support it. For the long-term investor who has been watching this story across multiple years, who held a position through skepticism from financial advisors who could not explain it, from family members who called it a gamble, from market conditions that tested patience at every stage. The current picture carries one specific message. The bill is moving in the right direction. The 5 contested sections were worked through. The bipartisan coalition is real. The opposition has been organized and well-funded at every previous stage of this legislation's development. And the bill kept moving anyway. The grandfather clause is the provision worth tracking most specifically from here. Whether it survives into the version that reaches the Senate floor determines a structural regulatory outcome, a legal classification with downstream effects on institutional access and oversight framework. Senator Lummis has stated directly that the window to lead on digital assets will not stay open forever. Europe is not waiting. China is not waiting. She spent years building the Clarity Act so that America does not have to play catch-up. That urgency is now on the legislative calendar in a concrete way. A window of available Senate floor days that is shrinking week by week. The Federal Reserve's treatment of Ripple's bank charter is the second thread that carries beyond whatever happens with the Clarity Act. The executive order created documented public pressure for equal access. Whether that translates into actual processing speed for Ripple's application is a question that will be answered by December, separately from the Clarity Act vote. These two tracks are not the same story. Watching how they interact over the second half of the year will tell you more about the real direction of regulatory policy than any single statement from any senator. The thesis is intact, and the people who stayed informed through every delay will understand what happens next before those who stopped paying attention. After everything we covered today, what surprises you more? That the grandfather clause is still under active attack? Or that the Federal Reserve appears to be doing the opposite of what the White House executive order demands? Drop it in the comments. I genuinely want to know where your head is at. If this video gave you a clearer picture of what is actually happening, go ahead and like it. It helps this channel reach more people who need to see this, and subscribe so you do not miss the next one. Share this with someone in your circle who is only following domestic crypto news and has no idea what is happening globally. Stay informed, stay positioned, I will see you in the next video.